We're back. We're the Tri-State Sports Guys. Mike, this is one of our favorite segments, a Top 10 segment.
The most popular segment, I think.
Every week we try to get one of the viewers and listeners' suggestions for a Top 10 list. We've done a great job so far. This week's comes from Massachusetts, from Josh from Massachusetts. His list idea was based on some things that were close to his heart, and he wanted to know who he thought the top 10 athletes whose career ended prematurely, whether it was by injury, some unfortunate circumstance, not just because he was a bust. Usually our listeners submit a list. Josh was too distraught after the Patriot.
Wait, did something happen last week?
And I think they lost the game that he expected them to win.
Oh, right.
And he is still he's just walking around Fenway waiting for pitchers and catchers to arrive. So why don't you start with your top 10?
All right, so as I'm going through my top 10, my list is kind of dominated by baseball players.
Interesting.
And I think it just, a lot of times when you're looking at lists like this, you're looking at stats, and baseball is the easiest sport to look at stats. So my number 10, and it's going to probably not be on your list, it's a little out there, but I went with Josh Hamilton. Now, I know he's in the prime of his career now. He's winning MVPs. But no matter what he does from here on in, he's not going to put up the 3,000 hits, 500 home runs. He might not make. It's probably too late for him to make the Hall of Fame, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he had too much time in the crack house.
He really did. I mean, you look at how good this guy is. I mean, he could have been a guy you talk about as one of the top 5 baseball players of all time. And now he's going to be, a good footnote and he's a great player, but I think it's too late for him no matter what he puts up. I mean, unless he's playing into his 40s at this level. So, as great as Josh Hamilton is, what could he have been? I mean, who knows? Sky was the limit for him. Number 9, I went hometown. I went with Drazen Petrovic.
Oh.
Now, Drazen...
He is a special place in my heart.
Drazen's a guy who's not... he probably wouldn't have been... wasn't going to be a Hall of Famer. But what he did, he was coming into the prime of his career. He had coming off back-to-back seasons where he averaged over 20 points a game. Every season in his career, he averaged more points. As a Net fan growing up, I mean, he was every kid's idol. I mean, any Net fan...
He's the reason I'm a Net fan.
He was the best. And so, that obviously the tragic death of Drazen Petrovic was tough, and you really don't know what. I mean, if he would have put together a career where he was averaging 25 a game for 10 years, he averaged 22 points a game this last season. Yeah. So he was, moving up.
Could you imagine if he started his first, he was in Portland, right, in the beginning? 3 years? Where did he get drafted?
No, that was his boy Sharunas Marcellonis.
No, he didn't get drafted by the Nats.
He got drafted by Portland.
Yeah.
He was behind all those superstars.
Yeah, and he was getting no time. He was getting 5 points a game.
Basically his first 2-3 years in the league, and then he
went
to the Nets.
I think and I don't want to interrupt your list, but I think what makes his passing even more storybook is the fact that he passed away going over 100 miles an hour on an Autobahn.
He lives life, bro.
Yeah.
My man just lives life. All right, number 8, I got Mark Pryor. Now he's kind of the ultimate what if. We don't even. He had such a short career that it was hard to know what he would have been. But he was a guy who came up, and it was funny because when he came up, they said the way his motion was and his mechanics were so perfect, he was never going to get hurt. And he had that. He was a polished pitcher. He wasn't just a big arm. He was a polished pitcher as a rookie, and. Who knows what would have happened to him. I mean, he could have been a perennial 20-game winner.
Yeah. I had him as my number 2. He won 18 games in his second year, and the rest of his career, he won 18 games.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. All right, number 7, another baseball player. I went with myself, Mike DePalma.
What could have been?
Well, now look, and I'm sure I'm somewhere on your list too, but my senior year, I pulled my hamstring, as you well know, and it was really during the middle of a miracle senior year. And I think most experts would agree that I'd probably gone in the first 5 rounds. My guess would be I would have gone to the Mets, right? Now, this is 2002, coming out of college. Probably be in the majors by 2005. They would have never had to sign Beltran. They could have taken that money and gone and signed a pitcher. We probably got a couple World Series titles under our belt. It really that pulled hamstring, you could trace that back, changed the course of New York history, New York sports history.
It's funny you mention you, because I actually had you as an honorable mention. And the reason you weren't in my top 10 was because I just wasn't sure that your game translated well to the big city.
I got 5 tools.
I feel like you are you one of those guys. You play well and you fill up a box score. Yeah. But in a big spot, can you drive in that big run?
Listen,
I don't know. Maybe it was because of it. Maybe I only saw you play. Maybe it was because of the hamstring, and maybe you never got over that. I just wonder how that translated. But I will say this: as a softball teammate, I'm glad that you got hurt because now you play with us.
Well, the big winner was O'Neill softball.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you pitched me inside. I'm stepping on four pillows. You know,
Yeah.
you're going to see my back around third base. And
Yes.
if you try to go away, all I'm going to do is keep my hands back and go the other way with it. But that, we can make a whole.
You
segment.
had a lot of talent.
We could talk
You-
about
you
my
sh-
college career
Yep.
for hours. If you
We'll
really
get
need
into
to.
that.
We're going to
Who was better, me or you? That'll be a whole nother segment.
All right, number 6, I got Juan Gonzalez. I know you're not as high as on Juan Gonzalez as I am, but when he was healthy, he was as good as any hitter ever. I mean, this guy had 434 home runs. He only had 4 seasons where he had over 140 games played. All right, he had a career OPS of 904, 2-time MVP. He was on his way. If he had strung together another 4 or 5 healthy seasons, and any healthy season, he put up big numbers. I mean, this guy was a first ballot Hall of Famer. He would have been a 600 home run guy. I mean, nobody talks about him as being one of the greatest hitters of this era. He really was. And whether he took steroids or not, I've heard speculation of that. You could speculate about anybody in the 90s. So I don't want to hear that.
And interestingly enough, his career also ended because of a hamstring injury.
He did.
Yeah.
The parallels between me and Juan Garner are very similar. All right. Number 5, I got your boy, Darryl Strawberry. Now, Straw, by the age of 29, had 8 consecutive All-Star appearances under his belt, 280 home runs, easily would have was on pace for 500 home runs. Again, he would have gone down as one of the best. He already is one of the best Mets ever. I mean, obviously he had left to go to Los Angeles when he got hurt, but his career was already starting to dovetail out of control there. But he would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer himself if he had stayed healthy. I mean, I think he was consistently putting up 35 home run seasons.
He hit a ball out of Montreal. If they didn't have a roof, it would have left the stadium.
It would have left the country, probably. I mean, that ball was crushed. So Straw is my number 5. All right, 4, I'm moving over to football. I got Terrell Davis. Now, Terrell Davis put together 4 seasons to start his career where he averaged over 1,600 yards a season. That's just unbelievable. Every one of those seasons he had over 4.5 yards a carry. And you could say he was kind of a system running back, which he probably was, but that even, to me, it even proves that he would have been that great because anybody was rushing for 1,000 yards on that team. So if he had stayed healthy another 4 seasons, he's probably averaging another 1,500 yards. And then we're talking about one of the best running backs of all time.
Yep. He was my number 3.
He's unbelievable. Number 3 is the only guy I have who I didn't personally see play, and mostly because it's hard for me to judge just some of the old timers. And I'm sure there's going to be a ton of people who we left off the list.
Yep.
I went with Sandy Koufax.
Wow.
Now, Sandy Koufax, youngest guy ever voted into the Hall of Fame, already considered one of the greatest pitchers of all time, but all of his numbers came in a 6-year span. I mean, over a 6-year span, he averaged a 21-8 record, 280 Ks per season over that 6-year span. And he was out of baseball when he was 30, so he was just in the prime of his career.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think Sandy Koufax, he already is in the conversation of best pitcher of all time. I think he would have been left no doubt that he's the best pitcher of all time. Number 2, I got Dwight Gooden.
Wow, Darryl and Doc.
I mean, Doc, at the age of 26, already had 134 wins. I mean, he was on track for a 300-win career. Again, he had just no flaws in his game. I mean, he was just unbelievable. And, there was injuries in there, but obviously the drugs, suspensions, 3
His
drugs.
one flaw was he liked to party.
I thought we did our top 10 worst people in sports already.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He wasn't really into cocaine, just like the smell of it. So that was his problem. All right, number 1, I'm sure he's on your list. I know he's your main man. I got Bo Jackson. I mean, any kid who grew up in the 80s had a Bo Nose poster. They had the sneakers. He was the guy. He was the athlete of our generation growing up. He's my number 1. I just think he would have gone down as one of the best overall athletes of all time.
Fair. All right, we don't have a lot of overlap there, just 2 or 3. I'm just going to get into quickly some of my guys.
Mm-hmm.
Number 10, I had a tie between Jim Brown and Barry Sanders. Both guys finished they retired. They're easily Hall of Famers. Jim Brown, considered one of the greatest baseball players of all time, football, if not the greatest football. And he's also considered the best lacrosse player of all time. The thing about Jim Brown, which I give him like a slight edge in this list, is that Barry Sanders retired just because he was tired. Maybe he's tired of losing. Jim Brown just retired because he wanted to go to do some movies. He wanted to go to Hollywood. Right. Here's a guy who's like, you know what? I'm done scoring touchdowns. Who needs this?
Yeah.
I want to go hang out with lovely girls in Hollywood.
I thought of actually both of those guys, but I didn't think that they fit into the list of injuries and all that. But okay.
Number 9, I put Len Bias, who he really started the whole athletes and drugs. People need to watch out. He got drafted by the Celtics. He was going to be their savior coming out of Maryland. He was, by all accounts, he was unbelievable, and by all accounts, he was a good kid. And just he partied to celebrate, and he passed away, unfortunately. And a lot of people say it set back the Celtics 10 years.
Yeah.
Number 8, I have Matt Anderson, who was, I don't know if you remember him, he was the number 1 pick of the Tigers back in 97. The thing about Matt Anderson, he threw 100 miles an hour.
Yep.
He made it to the majors his second year, and he was unbelievable. I believe in 2001, he had 22 or 24 save chances. He was throwing 100 miles an hour. And then one day, they had a contest in Detroit. The winner of an octopus throwing contest would get free tickets to the Detroit Red Wings hockey game.
Yeah.
And him and Jeff Weaver competed, and he threw out his arm, and he was out of baseball.
Yeah.
Here's a guy who left baseball because he threw an octopus.
Yeah.
In a team-sponsored activity.
Yeah.
He's actually coming back. He's coming back this year, apparently. He's 34. He's trying out for the Phillies. That's all the Phillies need is another good pitcher.
Yeah, right.
Number 7, I can't believe you don't have this guy, Maurice Clarett. This guy won a national championship with Ohio State, tried to challenge the NFL and come into the league.
Tried to change the rules.
They said, who are you? He had to sit out a year. He got drafted, got cut because he didn't think he was getting the ball enough.
He came in fat. He ran like 4.8 too. Remember
camp.
that?
Yeah, I do remember that. And then he got arrested for gun charges, and I think now he found the Lord, and he's like in that Toronto League or something. Number 6, and a real unfortunate death, Hank Gathers.
Yeah.
Hank Gathers died on the court. He was unbelievable. At Loyola Marymount, he was averaging 32.7 points and 13.7 rebounds. He was going to be a top 10 pick. His boy Bo Kimball, in my opinion, who got drafted by the Knicks, he really got drafted just because people thought he was that close to Hank Gathers.
Right.
But I'll say this, Hank Gathers went out on an alley-oop dunk. If you're ever going to go out as a basketball player, that's the way to go. Number 6, I had Penny Hardaway. Penny Hardaway, he was good. He took his team with Shaq to an NBA final. And then remember he had Little Penny? He was Chris Rock was Little Penny, wasn't he? And he was the most marketable guy.
His name's Anthony. That's a great name.
Anthony. Yeah, and he was one of the first guys to ever left college early, and they let him leave early.
Yeah.
Like Memphis State, I believe.
I looked him up. I thought of him. He was in my top 10.
Yeah. And the thing I like about him is he was one of the last athletes to have the old school box fade.
Yeah.
It was a great hairdo.
Kept it tight, yeah.
Number 4, I had Jay Williams of the Bulls, who played at Duke. He was unbelievable at Duke. He was drafted number 1 overall. He played 75 games. He played 1 season, and he got in a motorcycle accident, or like a one-man motorcycle accident, like in a parking lot.
Yeah.
And he was never the same. He tried to come back with our very own New Jersey Nets, just never worked out. I had Terrell Davis and Mark Pryor. My number 1 is Bo Jackson, and I'm only going to talk about him because he is my favorite football player. He's the reason I'm a Raider fan. And I'm just going to give you a few statistics on him. This guy ran a 4.0840, and he was a monster. He had 231 yards in a Monday Night Football game, which is still a record. He had for his career. You were talking about TD averaging 4.5 yards per carry. For his career, he averaged 5.4 yards a carry.
He was a beast.
He's the only guy in league history to have more than one 90-yard touchdown run, and then he has a third run of 88 yards.
Yeah,
which is unbelievable. He played baseball, was a leadoff hitter, and also hit a home run off Rick Russell. And I just want to leave you with this comparison. Larry Johnson in 2006 for the Chiefs has one of the greatest statistical seasons ever. He had 415 carries for almost 1,800 yards and 17 touchdowns. That's a good season, right? In his career, Bo Jackson had 500 carries, 2,700 yards, and 16 touchdowns. And that was when he was splitting carries with Marcus Allen. For Larry Johnson to achieve those numbers in 100 more carries, he would have had to average 10 yards a carry.
Yeah.
And last but certainly not least, Bo Jackson was the greatest video game player of all time.
Yes.
Tecmo Bowl, up and A. It didn't matter if the other team knew it. If you hit up and A, you just hit Bo Jackson.
Ruined the game.
It did, I was a Raider fan. It didn't ruin the game. He was unbelievable.
Well, I mean, if you were playing your friend, you couldn't be the Raiders. It wasn't fair.
And he was a good baseball player. He was a Hall of Fame running back. Tony, Paco, you guys got anybody?
Yeah, guys. I mean, I'm happy you guys brought me in for the picks, but you guys missed some very key ones here. I mean, I want to put all 10 Mets on the list and just throw everything out there. Let's put a Yankee in here. Mickey Mantle. This guy put a video up at the end of his career saying, I partied too much. My career's over. There's nothing I can do. Please don't do what I did. Pete Rose's career didn't end early to baseball, but he had a lot to offer to coaching and everything. And this guy was gambling from the dugout. I mean, who's better than that guy?
That's the
And on the Super Bowl note, since the Jets hopefully will be there, Broadway Joe. I mean, that guy's still drunk on TV as of a year ago. And any interview that he does now, it could be 11 in the morning. It's a possibility.
Who do you got,
have,
Tone?